Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to the March edition of the Community IT Innovators webinar series. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about deploying and managing Windows 10 in a business environment. Today we conclude our three-part series on IT security, which has been our focus for the first quarter of 2016. In case you missed the first two parts on new threat landscape and disaster recovery planning, you can find links to the recordings of those webinars on our website. Next month, we'll begin a three-part series on the use of SharePoint as an online document management solution, and we hope you can join us for that. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I am the President and CEO of Community IT and the moderator for this series. We'd like to share a few webinar tips with you before we begin. Most importantly, we'd like to encourage you to interact with us by asking questions via the GoToWebinar chat feature. We'd also like to remind you to avoid multitasking during the webinar. You may just miss the best part. If you do happen to miss the best part or need to leave the webinar early, we'll be posting links to the recording and slides on our website, YouTube channel, and SlideShare account. In case you're not familiar with Community IT, our skilled and certified team of IT professionals serves the greater Washington nonprofit community, helping organizations of all sizes and capacities to advance their missions through the effective use of technology. We're deeply invested in the nonprofit community. We've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993, and we take a strategic and collaborative approach that fits the unique needs and culture of nonprofit organizations. And now I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Galen Wenger, who is flying this plane solo today. Galen, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Johan. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
So, thank you for the introduction, Johan. My name is Galen Wenger. I'm a senior engineer with Community IT, and I've been with Community IT for almost 7 years now, 7 years next month. Today, we will be talking about Windows 10 in a business environment. We'll be starting with an overview of Windows 10, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into the new servicing branches that comprises how Windows 10 stays up to date and is turning into really an operating system as a service. We'll look at the upgrade process for performing an upgrade of a Windows 7 or Windows 8, 8.1 computer to Windows 10. We'll look at some of the options for customizations of Windows 10, particularly those that are of interest to organizations and enterprises. And then we'll provide some of our guidance or best practices for how to consider your upgrade to Windows 10 and what we're recommending to our clients here at Community IT. And we'll also have some time for some question and answer at the end. So when this webinar was first announced and advertised, I believe the title was actually Windows 10 in the Enterprise, and that's shifted towards being Windows 10 in a business environment. And much of what we'll be talking about today applies to organizations of any size. When Windows 10 was released back in the summer of last year, but for businesses, the really important release was the second threshold release in November. That's when Windows 10 gained some additional features for businesses and management. Some of the additional group policy additions were added in, and Microsoft really began pushing Windows 10 as being ready for the business environment. We continue to have updates to Windows 10 since November, and it's really a great time to start considering in some detail when the right time is to upgrade in your organization, and and when we can expect to see it spread to a larger uptake. So Microsoft believes that Windows 10 is the best platform and device for modern business, mostly because it now works on any device. So you see the convergence that's been promised for some time now. You have Windows 10 on the desktop, you have Windows 10 on the tablet. Microsoft would love to put Windows on your phone as well, though that is less popular right now. We see it showing up becoming more simple to set up and manage, and we see some really great security improvements. And that's something that we're going to focus on in detail as we dig into the webinar. Community IT has done a webinar on Windows 10 and Office 2016 before, as well as we've linked to some information from Microsoft on Windows 10, and we'll be providing those links on our website along with the recording of this webinar. So, overall impressions. Windows 10 feels pretty familiar to those of us who have been using Windows for some time. Windows 8 was more focused on a touch interface. Windows 10 now feels familiar to the Windows 7 user. We have a more familiar start menu, and I believe I'm quoting Microsoft accurately when I say that while Windows 8 was targeted at the touchscreen user, Windows 10 is really targeted at the power user. For organizations that are looking to use Office 365 services, Windows 10 provides some nice new features and integration with Office 365. And if you are using Office 365 or planning to use Office 365, it's really worth considering an earlier upgrade. And perhaps most importantly, and different from previous versions of Windows, the in-place upgrade process from Windows 7 or Windows 8 to Windows 10 works quite well. So, deployment choices. We have the traditional wipe and load, which is we would take the computer and erase whatever is on the computer and then install our new Windows 10 image. That has a lot of investment in preserving the user data, since we have to copy that off before we install the new operating system. But it provides a lot of control over the overall upgrade process. Microsoft has also provided an in-place upgrade option that really lets Windows do all the work. Instead of having to manually copy the data off of the computer and then install a new image, Windows can instead preserve the data in place and install the new Windows 10 image over top of Windows 7 or Windows 8, 8.1. This is the scenario that Microsoft is recommending for existing devices on Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. The third option that we'll touch on briefly is that Windows is providing a new model for provisioning settings and applications in a choose-your-own-device scenario. We are all familiar with the term bring your own device, or BYOD. There's also choose your own device, in which case the device is still owned by the organization, but it gives staff members the ability to choose the device that works better for them. It could be a particular laptop or a particular form factor. And the provisioning features built into Windows 10 allow the organization to build a provisioning package that allows the organization to install certain settings, perhaps configure an Outlook profile out of the box, but without having to do the much larger adoption of bringing the computer into the domain, for example, or configuring group policies that really lock down the computer, perhaps beyond what the user, who is rather invested in having this own personal device, would want. When we look at deployment approach, for small offices, we're generally looking at doing the upgrade with Windows Update. Many of you are probably familiar already with the Get Windows 10 update notifications that you may have seen in your tray. I noticed in an update that's coming out just this month for Internet Explorer that they're now going to start bugging people to get Windows 10 when they're using Internet Explorer as well. And for many small offices and those that lack centralized administration, that's really going to make the most sense. It provides the least amount of control in terms of customization, but it's going to provide the smoothest and easiest, least labor-intensive method for upgrade. For your larger organizations, your managed offices, we're looking at an upgrade using perhaps Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which is Microsoft's supported imaging and deployment system, or SCCM, which provides a greater subset of features beyond MDT. We have also used that at Community IT, and it works quite well. Additional options for our Community IT clients, we have an upgrade process that runs through our endpoint management tool, and that has also worked quite well. And there are other third-party options available as well. So let's look at Windows as a service. Windows 7 provides a familiar and standard model of enterprise support, by which we would have a rather monolithic version of the operating system that would then have updates applied to it over time. And in the business environment, we would use either Microsoft provided tools such as WSUS or third-party update servicing tools that would allow us to manage what updates are installed on the computer when, as well as stronger enforcement and compliance to make sure that the updates were delivered at the right time. And if you've been managing updates for Windows in your environment, you'll know that we're seeing generally anywhere from 10 to 20 patches a month come out for Windows 7, and it can be a very time-consuming process. Windows 10 changes that quite a bit. First of all, Microsoft is considering Windows 10 to be the last version of the operating system, and they are moving towards a model that is perhaps more familiar to Mac users. And I would say this is mostly a response to market realities. Microsoft is the last remaining operating system vendor that has been trying to monetize the client OS. What we're seeing on the Mac side, and definitely on Linux, is that you buy the hardware and the operating system comes for free. And the upgrades to those operating systems come for free, and they come more frequently. So on OS X, you're seeing an upgrade to the operating system with new features coming, perhaps once a year, once every 18 months. With Windows, it has been once every 3 to 4 years. We have a generational change in the version and upgrade of features, and that can be very challenging to manage. There is a lot of testing that's involved in that. The application of that upgrade was often very time-consuming, and in many cases, for good reason, the upgrade of the operating system was tied to a refresh of the hardware. So depending on your refresh rate, you're looking at a change in operating system every 3 to 5 years. And again, expense in the licensing purchase for that operating system. Microsoft is now trying to move away from that, and while doing so, still bring along their heavy investment in the enterprise and provide the enterprise control that we've come to expect for Windows. It is, I think they have a good model here. It is going to require some adjustment for all of us. So first of all, let's look at the update deployment options, and we're going to spend the next few slides talking about the different channels for updates. What we're looking at now for Windows as a service is that we're going to see incremental upgrades of Windows every, I would say, 3 to 6 months. So far, we've had one upgrade. We had the initial release back in, I believe, July, and then we had an upgrade in November. And so we're probably looking at a new version of Windows coming out sometime in the next 2 to 3 months. When we look at how Microsoft is then pushing those upgrades out, we have the different branches. So if we look at the Windows 10 Home, they are always going to be on the current branch, which means that every time a new upgrade comes out, they must go ahead and apply that upgrade to continue to receive updates. For Pro, we have the current branch for Business, which means that that upgrade is running about 4 months behind the current branch, and we'll see this explained out a little bit more in the next upcoming slides. And the delivery updates, we have a little bit more control. Instead of only being through unmanaged Windows Update, in which Microsoft is basically now forcing people to update their computer on their schedule, we have Windows Update for Business, which is kind of a Windows Update, WSUS Lite. It provides some control in how frequent or how soon updates are applied, but not as much control over whether an update is applied and compliance checking. And then we have the familiar WSUS tool, Windows Server Update Services, that allows us a full feature package for deploying updates. In Windows 10 Enterprise, we have the same options, except we also have the long-term servicing branch, which this is not really a branch that's appropriate for the Office user. Microsoft is targeting the long-term servicing branch as computers that are tied to particular devices or functions outside of normal Office use. It has a different subset of software installed, and one Microsoft guidance I saw is that they're targeting at, say, a medical device that is used in life-saving operations. We want to make sure that one is rock solid, and we don't expect it to have regular updates. Windows 10 Education is a new edition of Windows, and that is basically Windows 10 Enterprise, but with a couple different features for educational environments. For organizations that are interested in Windows 10 Enterprise, so first of all, if you have Windows 7 Enterprise already, you may know that the free upgrade that Microsoft is pushing, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, is not available for the Enterprise license. You will need to purchase that Windows 10 Enterprise license through volume licensing, such as through TechSoup for nonprofits. It's also worth considering that some of the administrative and customization features between Pro and Enterprise are different than what we saw in Windows 7. And if you are looking at having a more tightly controlled or managed environment, Windows 10 Enterprise is perhaps going to be the option for you where Windows 7 Pro was the option previously.
Galen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a question that's kind of closely related to that. Is it possible, if you purchase the Windows 10 Enterprise license, is it possible to do an in-place upgrade from Windows 7 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise?
Yes, it is, using your enterprise deployment tools such as MDT or SCCM. The Windows update method is only going to be for going from, say, Windows 7 Home to Windows 10 Home or Windows 7 Pro to Windows 10 Pro. Great question. So looking at the release option, this covers a little bit more of some of what we were covering in the previous slide, and notice how it also ties in the Office 365 client. And this is an important note for folks who are in Office 365 and perhaps licensing Office 2016 or Office Pro Plus through Office 365. They are now following that same update cadence. So we can see here at the top that we have the current branch and current channel for Office 365, which is generally targeted at your home non-organization users. And Microsoft, frankly, they are trying out the new software on the home user first and getting out, using that as their opportunity to get out the remaining bugs before they push it to the business or enterprise environment. So we have a current channel for both Office 365 and Windows 10. Office 365 has an excellently named option called First Release for Deferred Channel, which this would be for your Office 365 Pro Plus, so Office 2016 that you get through Office 365. You do have the option to jump ahead a little bit if you want to make sure that you're getting those newest features. Then here in the middle, this is where most organizations are going to be. The current branch for business is what it's called for Windows 10, and the deferred channel is what it's called for Office 365. So these options mean that you have a few months lead time for Microsoft to get out those remaining bugs, as well as for you to have an opportunity to do some testing in your office if you have particular applications that you want to make sure are still going to be compatible with the newest features, as well as perhaps considering how those new features are going to fit into your organizational policies. And then at the very bottom here, we have on the Office side, we can do the traditional Office Pro Plus 2016 through volume licensing and through the traditional deployment method. And again, that long-term servicing branch, that's really for situations where the stability of the computer outweighs some of the new features. And really, again, Microsoft is not targeting the long-term servicing branch of the Office user. That's more for computers that are serving particular roles. So a lot going on this slide. We'll point out a few options here. This provides some additional detail on both the current branch and the current branch for business. You can see here if we look at the availability for new feature upgrades, current branch is immediate, so as Microsoft is releasing those features, they are showing up on your current branch computer. Current branch for business, those upgrades are deferred by 4 months. And long-term servicing branch, there is no upgrade. That is your monolithic release, similar to Windows 7 and Windows 8, 8.1, in which we have a major version release, and then we just receive security updates, but not functionality improvements for 2 to 3 years. The support additions, So current branch is for all editions, but home is forced to be on the current branch. If we're in a pro or enterprise license, we can do current branch for business. And long-term servicing branch is available only to the enterprise SKU. So the other items here we've covered mostly in detail. One thing to note here is that when we talk about the browsers that are included, Microsoft does have a new browser in Windows 10 called Microsoft Edge. Internet Explorer 11 is still available for organizations that need Internet Explorer for certain apps, be those a corporate banking system that's operated by your bank, or perhaps an internal application that requires Internet Explorer 11. And notice here on the long-term servicing branch, we have several applications removed, such as Microsoft Edge and Cortana, and some of the universal apps, such as the built-in mail and calendar app. And to drive it home, perhaps this is the last slide on the servicing branch here, but shows kind of the time breakdown in terms of how Microsoft is doing their update cadence. You'll notice here that for current branch, we have an upgrade every 4 months, let's say, and that once that upgrade comes out, you're forced to upgrade to maintain current on your Windows installation, have the security updates and so on. Current branch for business, that same upgrade is coming out 4 months later, or 4 to 6 months later, and you can stay on the same branch for up to 8 months before you do an upgrade. One thing to note, and this is something where I hope we see additional guidance from Microsoft as time goes along, is how is the deployment of this upgrade. The deployment of the upgrade is, in effect, it's an installation of a new version of the operating system through Windows Update. If you've upgraded your home computer through Windows Update, and you know that process that I went through took about an hour, and we'll be covering some of the upgrade methods here shortly. It's the same process to do this version upgrade, this incremental version upgrade. And of particular note is we've seen some issues with the version upgrade, and I think this is something that I would look to Microsoft to speak to a little bit more. Items such as changing file associations back from where they were to the Microsoft preferred default. One that folks noticed in particular was when the November update came out, Microsoft changed the PDF file association from, let's say you had it on Adobe Reader, back to being the Microsoft Edge browser. Another thing that's important for businesses is if you have tried to customize some of the special Windows 10 apps that are on the computer, those apps were reinstalled when that upgrade was installed. So I think it is important to note here that by receiving this operating system as a service, we are getting some benefits, I think, and that Microsoft is saying for free now and in perpetuity, or at least as long as such things are guaranteed in technology. We will have a up-to-date and feature-rich operating system. In exchange for that, we are ceding some of the update control that we used to have in Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. It is a service, and online services change, sometimes in ways that we don't want. I think we do have a lot of stability in this model, but it is an adjustment for us. So, looking at the options for doing an in-place upgrade. So, for enterprises, we're probably looking at doing SCCM or NDT to manage the update, and we would be using the standard Windows 10 image that you would download from, for example, the Volume Licensing Service Center, and applying that, and it would preserve your applications, your settings, your drivers, but upgrade the operating system. That works pretty well, particularly for newer computers. If you have a computer within, that came out within the past couple years, there is a high likelihood that your drivers are going to be compatible and that your applications are going to be compatible. And I would say particularly for folks on Windows 8 and 8.1, that is going to be true. If you're on Windows 7, it is worth making sure that the key line of business applications that you use are going to be Windows 10 compatible. That is not the case for all applications yet. If you're just using Microsoft Office and a web browser and general Office tools, there's no real concern there. For our very small organizations, as well as for our home computers, Windows Update is going to provide a really reliable method for receiving the operating system. One thing to note here is that for organizations that are using disk encryption, the Microsoft Update methods, be that through Windows Update or through MDT and SCCM, they do support doing the in-place upgrade with BitLocker. That's not something we've actually tried for ourselves here in the Community IT Lab, but Microsoft does say that it works. For folks using third-party disk encryption, it does not work. Or, well, I should back up. Microsoft is working with those vendors to help it to work, but it's not going to work necessarily out of the box and would require some additional testing. For any of these upgrade methods, you're looking at a pretty fast and pretty reliable process that takes anywhere from about a half an hour to a couple hours. That, of course, depends on device speed and on the network performance. Also worth noting is that Microsoft does reserve the ability to roll back to the previous operating system for 30 days after the upgrade. So let's look at what the upgrade would look like for a Windows 7 computer in which we're using SCCM to deploy the upgrade. It's worth noting that the slides that we're going to show here, the upgrade process is very much the same for Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And if you're using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit already to build out a Windows 10 image for your new computers, it is very simple to add on a Windows 10 upgrade workflow to that same MDT environment and using that same deployment, ISO, and applications. So looking here, we've started the upgrade and we're still in the Windows 7 environment and it's running through some pre-checks, and then it is actually going to start applying the upgrade, and it's going to run for, in our experience, usually about 20 minutes here to do these initial preparation steps and to make sure that all the Windows 10 files are on the computer. And then it's going to reboot and spend about a half an hour, I would say, usually, again, depends on the device speed, to upgrade the operating system while preserving the existing applications and the data and the settings. It is worth noting that for your drivers, Windows Setup will prefer new drivers that are included in Windows 10 or available from Windows Update if those are available, but it will migrate older drivers when necessary. For folks in the enterprise, you can specify your own drivers to inject during the upgrade process. I would say that this is one area where some testing is warranted, particularly if we're looking at older computers. The drivers that are available from the manufacturer may or may not be the best drivers. And by the same token, the drivers available from Microsoft sometimes are less feature-rich, particularly around the area of display drivers. So again, it spends a little bit more time setting things up. And then we are in our new Windows 10 environment. Note here, we still have the same profile, we still have the same desktop icons, but we do have the new Windows 10 taskbar here and the new Windows 10 start menu. Note that we have kind of a hybrid between the Windows 7 start menu and, for the folks who are familiar with Windows 8 and 8.1, this tile environment of where we have the ability for some live tiles as well as some more touch-friendly pinned applications that make it easier to find the applications that we use most often. Let's actually spend a little bit talking about that start screen management, since that is one area that we found that organizations are particularly interested in leveraging some control over their environment for their staff, and for very good reason. Microsoft likes to include a lot of various apps, and depending on what settings are applied to the computer, add new applications in as they go along. Let's flip back here. So things to point out. One is we have a mail and calendar application. which in the enterprise, we generally would prefer that our staff use Outlook and not the built-in and less feature-rich mail and calendar options. We also have, a contacts folder here, Xbox games, which is perhaps not something that we want on our organization computer. We have news tiles here. Let's see, I've also seen they had, by default, they've been including a Minecraft application. And really, it's not necessarily the professional environment that we want. So how can we customize this? Well, we can do customization via XML. And you can export out you can customize the start screen, export out that XML, and import it back into your imaged or upgraded computer. If you're using an enterprise edition of Windows 10, you can actually control it from group policy. And what's actually really nice, and this is an improvement from Windows 8 and 8.1, you can both set certain sections of the start menu while allowing your staff members, your users, to configure portions of it on their own. Again, I think, in my mind, this is kind of one of the gotchas of the Pro license. Microsoft does not support start screen customization on an enterprise distributed method. Under the Pro license, it's only under the Enterprise edition. So, considering your deployment approach and the timing for that. So, and I will say this is a little dated slide here, because you'll notice here it talks about upgrading to Internet Explorer 11 by January 2016. Well, we're in March. And hopefully we've already all of us have upgraded to Internet Explorer 11. Microsoft no longer provides security updates for previous versions of Internet Explorer. And it's a little outside the scope of this webinar here, but for folks who do need a previous version of Internet Explorer to access certain enterprise applications, there are new features available for Internet Explorer that provide better backwards compatibility to those older websites. So when we think about our upgrade considerations, first of all, will it break anything? Will our hardware work? Will our software work? Those are key considerations. But also with that, does it have the new features that make an upgrade worthwhile? On security, yes, it does. Windows 10 is going to be supporting more options for multi-factor authentication. It is going to be supporting better anti-malware technology. And we think about Windows 7 came out, I believe, 6 years ago now, perhaps more. And so we're talking about a pretty old code base that has been updated quite a bit over time. And really, there's only so much that they can do to maintain the security of Windows 7, and that's really something that's on all of our minds right now. So in that regards, the upgraded security is a definite win for Windows 10. I would say, when we talk about is it worth upgrading our operating system, some of the software benefits, I think it can have a benefit for user morale to have to know they're running the latest and greatest software and operating system. Windows 7 is still a great operating system, but it is starting to look a little bit dated compared to OS X and Windows 10. So that can be a nice side benefit there. And I think also if you're looking at leveraging Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business in your environment, definitely consider an earlier upgrade to Windows 10. Windows 7 can still do all of it, but Windows 10 is going to provide some better hooks and opportunities to leverage those new cloud interfaces. I would say if you're running Windows 8 or 8.1, there's really no reason not to upgrade, in my mind. Your hardware is going to be compatible. Your software is going to be compatible. And for your users, they've already reached the height of learning the new UI, user interface. The user interface in Windows 10 is just easier than Windows 8. For folks coming from Windows 7, there's going to be a little bit of learning. For folks, if they've learned how to use Windows 8 and 8.1, there is some adjustment, but it's very intuitive because we've already been through, well, much worse, quite frankly. The other thing to consider when looking at when to upgrade is definitely considering the cost. So Microsoft is making the upgrade free for anyone except for folks running the enterprise versions of Windows 7 and 8.1. But they're saying it's free only through this summer. Well, so it's an enticing offer for sure. I would say for most organizations, the license cost is not the key cost driver in considering an in-place upgrade. The key cost driver is going to be your labor involved to do that. So consider, for example, the amount of time to test. If IT is doing the actual deployment, through any number of tools, that's a significant investment. There's going to be training involved, etc. If you're running on older computers, let's say computers that are 3 years or older, it may be worth waiting a little bit longer and just upgrading to Windows 10 when you do that computer refresh, and leveraging some of that labor that you're already going to have to spend on the hardware refresh, and just go ahead and do the upgrade at that time. And traditionally, that's what we've done in the past. For most of our organizations who have upgraded when they upgrade from XP to Windows 7, that was a hardware refresh. For the folks who are on Windows 8.1, that generally also came through a hardware refresh. So that's not a bad option and still very applicable. The last note I will say on when to upgrade is that it is worth considering that Windows 7 is going to leave support in January 2020. So by leaving support, I mean no more security updates. Now, that's a ways away, and it feels very far away, but it's not as far as we might think, especially if your organization had any trouble moving off of Windows XP, either due to compatibility concerns with applications or funding concerns. It's worth noting that now is the time to plan when Windows 10 is going to be coming into your enterprise. It is coming at some point. An in-place upgrade is an enticing option for this go-around. But at some point, either now or with that next hardware refresh, Windows 10 is going to be coming. And we do want to make sure that Windows 7 departs the organization well before the end of support. The last thing I'll say, as the patch administrator for Community IT, patching Windows 7 has become increasingly problematic in terms of the overwhelming amount of security updates that they have added on to Windows 7 over time, and just the actual system resources required to run Windows 7. We're really starting to see some problems with the older computers. So it's that operating system, I think we're going to continue to see additional challenges in making sure that it stays up to date. And we're all aware of probably of all the various ads and pop-up notifications that we've been getting from Microsoft about upgrading to Windows 10. So they're being very clear about what they would like folks to do.
Hey, Galen.
Yes.
We've gotten there were a number of questions now and during registration for the webinar. People sort of asking, like, what's our experience of Windows 10 been? How long should we wait before upgrading? I think it all kind of reflects a general sense that we have with Microsoft's operating system upgrades, that it's better to kind of sit it out and wait as long as possible, because it takes Microsoft a long time to sort of iron out the kinks and get everything working. And also, I think the Windows 8 rollout sort of made people feel like, the new version of Microsoft operating system means a lot of pain in learning how to use it, and we want to kind of push that off as long as possible. So I think there's still a sense that people have that Windows 10 maybe isn't quite ready for prime time, and I just kind of wanted to get your personal take on how you feel about that based on the Windows 10 rollouts you've been involved with and the feedback we've been getting from our clients that have gone through that upgrade already.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, I think on both looking at Office 365 and Windows 10, I have this sense that Microsoft's cadence has changed in how they're pushing things out. They are now pushing things out faster, but they perhaps aren't quite as ready. And perhaps that isn't changed because, as you mentioned, with say Windows 8, it felt like it came out well before it was mature. I think that in our experience, once folks do get moved over to Windows 10, folks definitely don't miss Windows 8 and 8.1 if they were there. And many folks are happy with the upgrade over Windows 7, and that's in terms of like a usability and UI perspective. In terms of is it ready for the enterprise? It was not prior to the November release. And I would say that for now, I would have no reservations about deploying it for new computers. If you're buying new computers now, I would say go ahead and go to Windows 10. It is ready or ready enough. Is it ready for an upgrade from Windows 7 in place? I don't know. It's a cost-benefit analysis, I would say. I don't think that, I think that it is ready enough. I think that the organization would need to be prepared for some adjustments in terms of dealing with, hey, how do I deal with, say, the Windows Store, and how do I deal with the fact that there are all these, Microsoft is trying to push these new apps on the computer. And so there's going to be some adjustment period. In terms of kind of like maturity of the operating system, I would say the one key area that I am hoping to see more guidance and maturity from Microsoft on, and and something that we may want to wait, for another upgrade cadence or two for before we push it out, is around that those incremental upgrades. So if we go back to our servicing branches, how we're jumping up that bar every 4 to 8 months to a new version, and what that upgrade does to our user experience in terms of which of the new universal apps are showing up. Does mail and calendar and Xbox come back, as well as do my file associations change? I think there's some room for improvement there for sure. And that ties right into the enterprise usability. So if we're looking at a very highly managed, tightly managed enterprise environment, it's still probably a little early for Windows 10. And hopefully we'll see some refinement on that. For a smaller organization or one that likes to be at the kind of the cusp of or one of the earlier adopters of new technology, I really have no reservations about Windows 10. There may be some adjustments along the way, but it's a mature operating system. It has worked well, and I would say for the vast majority of our upgrade experiences so far, folks have had a positive experience.
So it sounds like 2016 is really kind of a transition year. You're okay staying with Windows 7. If you're getting new computers, you should definitely upgrade. You should definitely get them with Windows 10 installed, and use this year to help train staff, and as an administrator yourself, learn sort of what the impact of Windows 10 is going to be. And 2017 is a year where where Windows 7 is really going to start to be long in the tooth, and you should look more seriously at just getting everything up to Windows 10.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think this, I think organizations have felt some additional time pressure because of that free upgrade offer from Microsoft that they say they're going to end in the summer. I obviously do not have the inside track to Microsoft. I kind of wonder whether they're really going to get rid of that deal, or if it's going to be anything more than a token upgrade cost after July. But I think that kind of puts some artificial time pressure on folks, or a sense of artificial time pressure, like, hey, I want to get up to speed quickly so I can take advantage of this upgrade process. Well, yeah, that's not the cost driver here, and that's not the productivity driver here. And I think the guidance you laid out there, Johan, is really really accurate.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So looking at this is something that applies mostly to our folks listening from larger organizations. Well, hey, now that we're moving to Windows 10, and how do I make sure that as these new upgrades are coming out and as we're on this Windows as a service model now, that all of the applications are going to keep working, and that I'll know how to preview these new features for my staff, so that, for example, and if you use Windows 10 on your home computer or perhaps at your work computer, you'll notice every now and then you'll get this little bouncing icon that says, I'm Cortana, ask me anything. Cortana, of course, is the voice driven speech recognition software similar to Siri, for example. Works quite well. I would say perhaps limited enterprise application, but folks are going to ask about it, and presumably there are going to be new features in the future. How do I find out about that? Well, so if you remember back to that previous slide where we had all those various different upgrade cadences, we can there are preview builds that are going to be available for organizations so that they can evaluate the new software in their organization, as well as provide some feedback to Microsoft. And these things are being rolled out in phases. Where I think Microsoft is getting away from this, the monolithic version of where of delivery of Windows in which you're kind of locked in to a particular version, and perhaps in some cases don't have any updates applied because we don't want anything to break. Now Microsoft is saying, hey, the upgrade is coming, and if you want security updates, you're going to have to upgrade, but we're going to do it on a reliable schedule, and we're going to provide you the time to study and demo, pilot the new version of Windows in your environment. But it's incumbent on you to take that time during your window of opportunity to do that testing if that's important for you. So our approach, Windows 10 is a solid operating system. Community IT internally, we've all been using it or almost all been using it for a while, and we feel pretty comfortable with it. And again, the clients that we have at Community IT that have upgraded are generally pleased with it. We are personally in beta testing for in-place upgrades. As I mentioned earlier, we do have, through our device management service, we do have an option to push out the upgrade that way. And we have been doing it on request for particular clients, do beta testing for 1 or 2 computers. And and that's something where I think that will continue to be an option. We also have a MDT solution that we use for both new computer deployments now as well as in-place upgrades. We are looking at, for folks that have computers that are 3 years or older, we're probably looking at doing a refresh of the operating system when the hardware is refreshed. But for computers that are within a couple years old, I would say we're looking at tentatively planning to do upgrades of in-place upgrades of the operating system. And again, I would say the jump in my mind is really going to be from folks moving from Windows 7 to Windows 10. If you're on Windows 8.1, my own opinion is I don't think there's a lot of reason to stay on Windows 8.1. So known issues, where we have seen issues with software. So there are obviously certain larger or monolithic business applications that are not ready for Windows 10 yet. I'm thinking about some of the e-medical records solutions, as well as certain other large business applications. If you have one in your environment, you're probably already thinking of its name. You know what I'm talking about. Other issues. So anything that touches the networking stack. VPN software, for actually on my computer, an issue with VMware Workstation, in which if a older version or unsupported application that interfaces with a network like a VPN client is on the computer when it's upgraded, it can cause some pretty notable networking issues. If that's been a red flag around us, one of the things that we check before we're deploying a upgrade. Antiviruses as well. To the best of my knowledge, most of the major players in the antivirus sector are Windows 10 compatible now. They may have differing guidance on whether you should remove the antivirus before you deploy the upgrade, or if you can do the upgrade while the antivirus is in place. Our experience of late is that you can generally, for the antivirus applications that we see at our clients, you can generally go ahead and upgrade it while the antivirus is in place, but that's definitely something to check before you deploy it in your environment. And I've already kind of touched on this somewhat, but how do we handle those changes to the new servicing branches and handle those upgrades that are coming out every several months? Those upgrades can so one of the things that we've experienced is that we can push a Windows 10 upgrade using our management system, and we can make customizations to the start menu and to the installed applications. Say for example, removing Minecraft from the application at the time of that upgrade. But then, 4 to 6 months from now, when Microsoft pushes a new upgrade, it perhaps through Windows Update, perhaps through another method. That's one of those things that we're waiting to see too, how that all shakes out long term. But is that application just going to come back? Start menu usually, I will say in the last upgrade, the start menu customizations did persist, but we saw new applications show up, and I think it's a question of how do we need to change our expectations about what we're managing on that computer, as well as do we need to and perhaps supplement that with some training, or do we need to be updating and upgrading our upgrade practices and tools? And I'm speaking not just by community IT, but organizations in general, to really be able to address the new challenges that come with Windows 10. So I believe we have some time for a question and answer here, Johan.
We do, and actually before we get to that, I want to plug next month's webinar, so if you could go to the next slide. So Unselling SharePoint, this is going to be, it's a provocative title, I think, and it's going to be a very provocative webinar. As I mentioned earlier, the second quarter, our theme is going to be using SharePoint for online document management. And the first step in SharePoint adoption is bringing people back down to earth and making sure they understand that there's tremendous return from going with SharePoint, but it also requires a significant investment. So we're going to dive into that topic in April. So that's on April 21st next month. So please join us for that webinar. Also, a few quick reminders, if you could hit the next slide. Once you exit the webinar, you're going to get a survey, and we really appreciate your feedback. We've been doing these webinars for several years now, and your feedback means a lot to us. So please take a few seconds to complete that survey. If you missed anything at all, we're going to send you a link to the slides and recording. Those will also be posted to our website, and you can find links to all previous webinars, slide and recordings on our website. And please feel free to connect with us via social media. Twitter, Google+, if anyone is still using that, Facebook and LinkedIn. I think we might need to get on Snapchat, have some Snapchat stories, post some Instagram photos. We might be refreshing our social media here before too long. All right, so go ahead on to the next slide, Galen, and we'll get back to the Q&A. Got some great questions, some great, very technical questions. I think we have a very technical audience here with us today. So I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm just diving straight into these technical questions. So one person asked if they already have DHCP and DNS, if they have separate servers or if they have those services running on a separate server, do those roles need to be installed on the SCCM server?
Great question. And my understanding is that no, those roles do not need to be installed on the SCCM server. They just need to be present in your environment.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad you knew the answer to that one. Some questions about group policy. So obviously group policy, very powerful tool that you can use to manage settings on your workstations. Are there any sort of specific policies related to Windows 10 that you've seen that you're excited by, or you think are going to be really sort of useful in the brave new world of Windows 10 Enterprise?
So really great question, and I'm glad it was asked because probably should have been covered a little bit more detail in the presentation. So most of your Windows 7, Windows 8.1 group policies are going to apply to Windows 10 as well. The one thing I would highlight, if you did not have any Windows 8, 8.1 in your environment, you may not have developed any group policies around the Windows Store. and that is where the kind of user self-service environment to install some applications. You may, in some ways it's a godsend. In some ways, it's we don't necessarily want folks installing applications on their computers. So if you haven't had any Windows 8.1 in your environment, you probably want to take a look at that group policy. For Windows 10 in particular, so one thing to note is that new group policy templates are coming out with each version upgrade of Windows 10, and it's just providing that new subset of features. One thing that we noticed in particular with the November update is that Microsoft has started pushing out, or has a feature in place that they call, well, I guess they describe it as Windows Consumer Features, that is going to download and install applications to Windows 10 based on where you're located and what they think you'd be interested in. So one thing in particular is that with the November release, Twitter, I believe, was downloaded and installed on demand on computers. And Microsoft is saying they would download and install more applications. Whether you want these applications, whether they're useful, is beyond the point. And I know I saw on and I saw on one, this is actually a TechNet blog, so Microsoft TechNet blog, where it was talking about start screen or start menu customization. And the guy wrote an update to his blog, and people were saying, like, hey, I customized my start screen, and now these new apps are showing up. Like, what's going on? And the Microsoft guy writes and replies, like, well, that's a feature. So thankfully, you can turn that feature off. There's a setting, I believe it's called Disable Windows Consumer Features, which honestly, for me, that's one that I would just automatically turn on in every environment so that you don't have new applications just installing themselves at the behest of Microsoft and whoever they've got a marketing deal with. So that's a big one, I would say. The other thing I would say is that it's worth familiarizing yourself with the Windows, let's see, it's ICD, and I believe that stands for, is it Installation and Customization Deployment? I'm afraid I have that acronym wrong. Anyway, it's part of the Windows 10 toolkit, Automated Deployment Toolkit, ADK, lots of acronyms. That is that new tool that allows you to develop provisioning packages. These packages might include software. It might include just a bundle of settings. And depending on your environment, that might provide a new alternative for some of the group policy work that you're doing, particularly if you have remote offices or work from home employees, choose your own device environments where group policy can kind of be a challenge because we aren't all in the same, the network is not in a single physical location. I would say take a look at those provisioning packages. I think we still need some better documentation, or well, we all need to learn more about it and perhaps some more maturity from Microsoft on that. But I think that is going to provide a really great model for your road warrior, work from home type user, or choose your own device where, hey, I just need to put a bundle of settings on there, but then the user is going to be managing it on their own for the most part.
Well, I think anyone who's worked with Microsoft or with Microsoft products for a long time is sort of used to this pattern or rhythm of not everything that Microsoft releases the first time around is well conceived or well executed, but I think it's safe to say that they do a great job of listening to their customers, mm-hmm. and particularly their business customers. And if they don't get it right the first time or the second time or even the third time, they will get it right eventually. And so some of these things like Twitter being automatically installed and so forth, if they get enough feedback, from their customer base that that's not appreciated, I have no doubt that it will stop, at some point down the road. So, I mean, that's kind of their tagline almost is, Microsoft, they get it right eventually.
Yeah. To their credit.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much, Galen. This has been really informative. There were a number of questions from the audience about sort of usability of Windows 10. That was a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but I encourage you to look at our June webinar. I chatted out the link to that, and you can find that link on our website as well. And in that webinar, we definitely get into more of the usability questions. So thank you so much for your time, Galen, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again next month. Take care.